Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day. It is Friday on the show. The first half of the show, we're going to be joined by Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. And when we get to the second half, we have a new multimedia journalist from SuperTalk Mississippi News that's going to be joining us. I look forward to introducing him to the audience. Without any further ado, let's go over to my friend Jeff Duncan. And first of all, say good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Ricky. It's good to see you. We had a couple weeks off, so it's good to be back in the groove.
Well, 1 week you were on the road with Steve Gleason. You can give us a report on how that went and how that's going. And then, of course, last week I took a little bit of time off myself, so nice little opportunity to get a deep breath. Kyle and I don't take a lot of time off. In fact, Kyle takes even less time off than I take off. So we'll probably have to do something about that. But tell me about your trip with Steve Gleason.
Well, we were up in D.C. for an event that kind of focused around ALS awareness. The ALS Awareness Month was May, so we kind of timed an event up along with a symposium on ALS with a lot of legislative leaders. It was great. I got a chance to visit with Tony Kornheiser, of course, from ESPN, who a lot of people forget, Ricky, was the color analyst on the Monday Night Football broadcast of the homecoming game when Steve blocked the punt against the Falcons. So that was fun to reminisce with him. They had not been together since that night, and I could see how moved Tony Kornheiser was to get a chance to visit with Steve and get a copy of his book. So it was all around just a great experience.
Yeah, I saw a lot of posts about it. It's great to be able to bring attention to ALS. And then from there, I saw where Steve went to the West Coast, and some of his posts were philosophical. I mean, there's something about going there that reconnects him with the people that are important to him, the area that's important to him. And of course, now that his book is launched, I'm sure that opened up even more conversations and whatever. But he's been posting very philosophically about it.
Yeah, and June 1 is Lou Gehrig Day for Major League Baseball, which is, of course, brings awareness to ALS. And Steve's always been a part of that. And Seattle Mariners invited him out along with some other guests. It was really a special day for him. He's done that at Wrigley Field and at Fenway Park in Boston. So he's making the rounds. He said he's going to try and get to every major league park before he's done. But it was fun I think, for him to get a chance to spend some time with his friends and family back home in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, look, we're going to talk Saints and OTAs, and we have some mandatory mini camps we're headed toward.
Next week. We get the whole team on the field, Ricky. Finally.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna see Marshawn Lattimore. We'll see AK, and it's gonna be pretty cool. But they've been going through this install process with the new offense and all that. I like what I hear. I know you're more reserved about it, but they are very methodical about it, aren't they?
Well, I think last week they were the fourth install, so the fourth time this offense has been installed. They're going through it, and they'll go through it a couple more times when they get to camp in out in LA. So this is part of the process of putting in this new system. And look, I do think players are excited about it. It's something new. They've been a lot of these guys have been in the same system for a while now. So anything new, like Taysom Hill said, is kind of challenging intellectually for you to kind of master a new system. But I think the biggest key, the thing that I'm hearing the most, isn't about the X's and O's. I mean, all the concepts in the NFL are pretty much the same. It's just how you get to the concepts, and that's a little different from scheme to scheme. How you label them is a little different. But there's no magic plays. Everybody runs kind of the same things. What I think I'm hearing that is kind of leaking out is the accountability in the building. That's what's got to change. And that, more than the X's and O's, are what could make a difference in this offense. Not only from the coaching staff, because I don't think it's all on the coaches. I think sometimes we have a tendency to blame Pete Carmichael. Pete Carmichael's a great offensive coach, a great mind. I mean, he knows what he's doing. It's more about, is everyone in the building holding themselves accountable? Are the players holding each other accountable? And I think there was a lack of that last year, not just from the staff, but from the leaders on offense. And I think that is what I'm hearing that I'm most encouraged about. Are they going to be able to do that? We'll find out. But that, to me, is much more important than some X and O concept.
It's interesting. I don't know if they were at a point during the season last year where they were going to lose the locker room literally, but there were some really challenging moments, as you well know. You and I talked about it. We worried about the role that Michael Thomas could play to engage some of that, and I agree with you, man. I think that what we're seeing is definitely around accountability. It was interesting on the podcast that I'm trying to remember whose podcast it was, but some players are talking about, for example, they think they did a play kind of well, and then the new offensive coordinator come up and said, "Man, that was good, but look, you need to get rid of the ball faster, or you need to turn quicker, or you need offensive lineman not getting in position the way he needs to quicker." But this real attention to detail, they don't think they were getting that before. They feel like they're getting that kind of coaching in ways that they didn't before. When you add it all up and then add that to the real focus on accountability, I think those little things, Jeff, are going to make a difference.
Well, it certainly was a problem in the past, and it wasn't just the offense; it was the defense too. I mean, attention to detail has been lacking, and we've written about that a lot. And I think we'll find out if it's executed once the season starts. There's a lot on the line this year. We've talked about that as well. This team's got talent. I don't know if it's one of the more talented teams in the NFL or one of the more talented Saints teams, but they've got enough talent to compete. And fortunately, they're in a division where there's no Goliaths. So there's someone going to step forward and win this division. And I think sometimes flying under the radar the way the Saints are right now, it's not a bad thing. They've had expectations on them for years, maybe a full decade. They've been hunted in the NFC South. So they're definitely not that now. And there's precedent, Ricky, where they've snuck up on people in the past. We'll see if this team can do the same.
I think I already know what your answer is going to be, but I'll say it anyway. These have not been mandatory camp that they've been going through more recently. Next week, as you pointed out, we discussed is. But some players aren't there. Some important leaders aren't there. And someone actually said, you don't have, like the Kansas City Chiefs, at least this is what they said. I don't even know if it's true or not. You don't have players that are choosing not to be there. They point out other players around the league that aren't at these OTAs. How do you read that the team is not complete during the OTAs?
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword. I mean, part of me doesn't believe it's that important. It's certainly not that important X and O's wise for veteran players to miss. Guys like Marshawn Lattimore and Alvin Kamara, they don't need this time of year to be prepared to play at a high level. It's more about the optics and the intangibles of showing your teammates you're bought in, you're all in. I think that's important, especially for those two players, because they're both looked at as the elite players in their position group. So they're held to a higher standard. That's who all the eyes are on in the running back room and in the cornerback room. So I do think there is something missing there. I mean, there's a reason DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, Derek Carr, those guys don't need this either, but they're there. But having said that, there's a lot of players around the league, elite players, that aren't there either. Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, I can go down the list. So I wouldn't overemphasize it, but I don't think it's dismissible either.
The more I hear about the San Francisco offense, the more I like it. I mean, there's a lot of misdirection and confusion they create for a defense. How is it so different than what we were doing before?
Well, I don't know it is that different. I mean, I think it's, talking to coaches and players, they use the illusion of simplicity to get to complexity. But the Saints have always done that, Ricky. They've always run concepts to set up other concepts later on in games. That's nothing new. I heard John Benton. I talked to him last week, the offensive line coach. He said, we run the same plays out of the different plays out of the same looks, the same sets. Well, Saints have always done that. I mean, every team in the league does that. So these things are not that different, I don't think. I think the difference is going to be they're going to emphasize the running game. They're going to have a little bit of a different a philosophy about how they block up the running schemes. John Benton talks about, not necessarily getting mauling at the point of attack, getting physical at the point of attack, but being more athletic, running in space, cutting off pursuit. I think that's the key is, can they run the ball? Can they improve up front and get a running game going so it takes the pressure off this passing attack? Because this passing attack is going to be solid, but it's not going to be the Drew Brees, high-flying passing attack that dominated teams a decade ago. It just doesn't have that kind of personnel. They got to be
Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll talk a little bit more about the offensive line. How good do they really have to be to do actually pretty well with this offense? We'll talk about that. And then Derek Carr talked about on a recent podcast about just how injured he really was last year. I think this is actually quite important. When we get back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. Appreciate you joining us as we love our Fridays because we get a chance to check in with Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. He's, he does sports, but he really does things like the Saints. I mean, he's the Saints expert. So let's talk about we'll come back to Derek Carr here in just a second, but let's talk about the offensive bit. I've read a lot about, the offensive line. I've read a lot about the offensive line. If the moves they're going to be making with Trevor Penny and our first round draft pick all kind of play out, they don't have to be barn burners. They can be an average offensive line. And to some extent, this movement approach that you're talking about, where they're going to be moving, not just battling out in the trenches, but getting the offensive lineman out running, that actually plays to some of their strengths. So how do you see the offensive line in terms of this new offense?
Well, I'll go one up on you there, Ricky. I mean, I think the offensive line can be better than average. I mean, there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of high draft picks, a lot of athletic ability that I think this scheme can accentuate. I think they've underperformed. Well, why that is, I don't know if it's players, coaches, the scheme, a mixture of both. But I do think there's a lot of talent there. And John Benton agrees, the offensive line coach. They've got to get it out of them. And I think this scheme does play to some of their strengths of the athleticism that the players have. But there's three new moving parts there, right? Right tackle, left tackle, and left guard. It's going to take a while to come together. I don't care how talented they are. And, I think that there's going to have to be a little patience, I think, imposed here because when you have three new linemen and a lot of young players there, even as good as I think Taliesin Fuaga is going to be, there's going to be some growing pains.
It's going to be really interesting to watch. I think you're right, man. We've got some high draft picks. There's several, if not most of them, are on rookie pay still. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, I think I said that right, actually. So we picked up some free agents. There's some opportunities here for them to really, really do well. So they've got a fresh start, as you pointed out, and we'll see how that all plays out. It was really interesting hearing Drew Brees talk about his injuries last year. A couple of broken ribs, how hurt his shoulder was, taking all those injections before the game. And he said it wasn't until March this year that he really started to feel okay. I mean, he was incredibly limited. So when we were looking at all those dump-offs and all those other junk that was happening toward the end of the season, in some respects, he had to do those things. He was trying to protect his body, and he was limited on what he could do. What will Drew Brees, what will Carr be not injured and settling into this offense?
Well, I mean, I think we got to wait and see because he got injured fairly early in the season, and we saw what was clearly a limited Derek Carr after that. He started playing better at the end of the year, so I think that's reason for optimism. He's looked great in camp so far, but he looked great in camp last year too. I remember distinctly, in training camp, raving about how good he looked, and he's always looked that way. The question with Derek Carr is always about when the games start in the fall. I think by now we know what Derek Carr is. I mean, we're 11 years into his career. I don't think he's going to blossom into something different. He's had a bunch of different offensive coordinators over the years, some very talented people. I think he can be good enough for this team to get into the playoffs and win the division. There's no doubt about that. It's a matter of, can they do the things around him? And I get back to the running game. That really, the offensive line protection and run blocking, I think, is going to make or break this offense, because Derek Carr, we've seen he can be at least a mid-level NFL quarterback, and that's good enough in this division.
So, yeah, I mean, go back and look at how he got beat to heck at the beginning of last season, man. And we talked about his ribs. We talked about his shoulder. Forget about the concussions. I mean, it was brutal, man. It was really, But that's going to happen again, Ricky. I mean, he's not going to. I mean, he's going to get hit again, and it's going to happen. You're not going to go unblemished. So that's playing in the NFL. I mean, listen to Drew Brees talk the other day. I mean, he still can't even throw with his right arm. He's been out of the NFL for 3 years. That it's a violent sport with big men running at high speed. So it's going to happen again. He's going to have to play. He's not going to be 100%. I mean, he's going to have to play through these injuries. A lot of times we don't even know about these things, these guys. I guarantee you right now, Cam Jordan has not told anybody about how limited he was a year ago. He had a ton of things going on, I know, never got public. It's just the way of the world. And so, I think more than anything, though, Carr's going to have to play better in the big games. That's what I want to see. When they line up against the Cowboys in week 2, what's it going to look like when he's on the road against an elite team, not the Carolina Panthers in the opener? I want to see him win on a stage like that. He hasn't done that yet with the Saints. Listen, real quick, just side note on Drew. It was really interesting to hear how, first of all, really never got kind of the retirement send-off that you would hope for a guy like that. I mean, the COVID stuff and all the other stuff that was in the way, but how bad his shoulder really was, and the fact that he said he can throw on a dime at 30 yards with left-handed. That's the way he throws with his sons. That's incredible, really. You think about it.
Yeah, and look, I thought it was a great session. When you listen to Drew Brees talk that day, I kept thinking to myself, this is what the Saints are missing. I mean, they don't have a leader like that in the building. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame talent. He's a generational talent, so it's not an indictment on the Saints. I mean, you just realize this is why so many players and coaches gravitate toward his orbit. Just because of that selflessness, that leadership. I mean, he talked about everyone else but himself, talked about people in the building people don't even know about, support staff and assistant equipment managers. That's what true leadership's all about. And I think they've been missing that for a long time in the building. It's hard to replace it. Historically, you look at Hall of Fame quarterbacks, when they leave an organization, there's a drop-off of about 3 to 4 wins a year, and that's kind of what we've seen here in New Orleans.
And, you think about it. I mean, it's clear to me, and I think that you as well, or anyone who watched, that had it not been for his shoulder, he would have played 2 or 3 more years. I mean, and it was sad to him. It was hard for him to decide not to play. I mean, it wasn't like it was a predetermined, decision. It was tough.
No, he used to talk to us all the time saying he wanted to play to 45. I remember having those conversations with him, and I think he would have if he could have. And what's funny, and this is what Bobby Hebert always told me, it's one thing to start the season. If you notice, Brees was always fine when he started the season, and then it tailed off because the physical toll takes its effect. And that's what Bobby Hebert always says. It's not can I play, it's can I play 16 games? Can I recover week to week? Your body starts to age, it's father time, and there's a corrosive effect and a cumulative effect on your physical condition over the course of a season. And that's what we saw with Drew Brees. That's why in the playoffs, he was always very limited. We saw the offense be somewhat limited in those games. And you're playing the best defenses in the league, too, at the same time.
Hey, speaking of Bobby, he's taking a lot of heat on his comments for Marshawn Lattimore. You hearing much blowback from that?
No, I haven't. I didn't know he's taking any heat. I didn't know that. I didn't even know what he said.
Yeah, he was. You have to go back. I'll tell you what we'll do instead, because we don't have enough time to get into it all right now. I'll send you something you can take a look at. But he made some comments about Marshawn Lattimore on the show that suggested that he's not a good leader, and went on from there. And man, did he take some heat for it?
Yeah, well, it's part of the gig. I take heat too. Sometimes you got to speak the truth. I think Bobby Hebert is old school. He was that way when he played back when he played, and I like guys that speak the truth like that.
In fact, that's what the folks that have defended him to say. He's paid to be a commentator. At the end of the day, you're going to agree with some of the things he says, and you're not going to agree with some of the things he said. But at the end of the day, he is old school. And yes, some folks wanted to say that what he was saying was racist, and that he ought to be fired from WWL, that WWL doesn't, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was crazy, crazy stuff. But obviously his defender said, guy doesn't have a racist bone in his body. Come on now, look at his track record. But
yeah, that's a shame that it's devolved into that. I didn't know anything about that, to be honest. I was with him at practice yesterday. He doesn't mention any of that.
Yeah, and that's not that's good. That means he moves on. Hey, but you got to do that, Jeff. I've seen you in really tough situations where you've either broke a tough story or made a very tough comment. And you take a lot of heat, and while the heat's, the flurry of heat's happening, whether it be in comments or however it's coming, you're already off working on your next thing. You don't have much time to sweat those kinds of things, do you?
No, it comes with the territory. It's part of the job. And look, the day and age with social media, things are different. I don't take anything on social media seriously. People are anonymous. You don't know who they are. They're hiding behind a keyboard. Literally, that doesn't affect me. And I've always said it's 1% of 1% of the amount of people that follow the Saints. It can't overreact to it.
I'm with you, man. As you know, I became pretty accustomed to that myself, and I know what it looks like. And somebody will say, well, you get a little heat on that right up there. I said, man, you don't know what heat is. I really know what heat is. Don't I, Jeff?
Yes, very much so.
So anyway, listen, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you. We'll see you next week, my friend.
All right, Ricky. We'll talk then, buddy.
You bet. Hey, when we come back, we have a special guest. We'll see you after this.